Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Thank you for joining us on this, beautiful summer, July 2nd, aren't we? Is it the 2nd? Yeah. So, anyway, for all of you who are coming back from vacation to see this, we have with us Professor Satish Nambisan, who is from the Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute in New York. Professor Nambisan's work is of particular interest to many of us here at Microsoft because for quite some time he has been studying the population in the Microsoft.public.star newsgroup hierarchy. A population of people who should be near and dear to many hearts here at Microsoft, the MVP population. MVPs, for those who are not familiar with it, are our most valued professionals. These are people who have been ardent cheerleaders and supporters and value contributors in our newsgroups and in other environments as well, but certainly in the newsgroups, to study the impact and role and motivation of the MVPs is a very interesting thing, and that's exactly what Professor Nambisan has done. I would like you to join me in welcoming him here, and thank him for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. It's really great to be here. Like Mark was saying, I have been for the past 3 to 4 years or so, I've been talking to MVPs and other Microsoft customers, trying to understand their motivations, their behavior, especially in online communities, and more so on the other side. And so it's first I want to thank Mark for inviting me here, and I hope that you'll be able to throw some insights in addition to what I bring to the table in terms of my research findings. Okay, my background is primarily in product development, innovation management, new product development, and so just to give you the angle from which I'm coming is I'm interested in how customers can contribute to product development. So that's the way in which I came to this topic. And I found that MVPs and even other customers who come to the online communities have something which is very valuable to contribute, not just in terms of product support, but also in terms of new ideas for product improvement suggestions, and even in during the design of the product. And so that's the primary motivation for this research. So what has changed probably is the way or the ease with which customers can link to the internal product development practices in companies such as Microsoft. What has changed is some of the technologies have made it much more easier and more cost effective for customers to come in and contribute and get something in return for their valuable value additions. So talk a little bit about the research motivation, and talk about the various roles customers can play in innovation and value creation, actually throughout the product life cycle, not just in product development, but also product support and product diffusion and marketing. And then we'll talk about virtual customer environments, which is essentially the broadly defined, which includes online communities or virtual communities, but it also includes other things which are enabled by technologies. One of the studies which I had conducted recently was on just the motivations of the behavior of customers in these kind of communities. So I'll talk more in detail about that. And then we'll come back to looking at some of the strategies for VCE-based initiatives. I'm coming from a business school, so you must excuse my language. Some of these are much more from the strategic management literature. Okay. The idea that customers can contribute to product development or other aspects of value creation is not really new. We have been using market research, which is essentially going and asking customers what they want or what are the needs, etc. So market research has been with us for a quite long period of time. Probably in this mid to end 1970s, there was also the concept of lead users, which Professor Eric von Hippel of MIT has started. That there are some users who are way ahead of the curve or way ahead of the majority of the customer population in terms of needs, identifying the needs, and even in giving terms of types of inputs. So lead users are users who face needs well before the majority of the customers face those same needs. So a company would be much more effective. They can really identify those lead users and go and talk to them. That was the idea in the lead user research. And the problem with that is, first problem is how do you define or how do you identify those lead users? And second is, there is a cost implication for going and talking to those lead users. So the technology has changed both of those factors. It has made much more cost effective, and it's much more easier to connect with lead users. So using customers or utilizing customer knowledge is not really new. And then we had this internet revolution, online communities and all kinds of new forums for customers to come and talk to one another as well as to the vendor in terms of what the product is, how they would like the product to be changed, what new features they would like to see in the product, etc. So there have been some codes which I just put just to give you an idea of the way in which this discussion has changed over the past 3 to 4 years. Outlook magazine is actually a magazine of Anderson Consulting before it became Accenture. So that's a strategy consulting people. Well, that was an code which just tells you maybe internet technology. That was 1999, so it was a little bit rosy picture at that point in time. At least that they could become co-creators of value along with firms. And in addition to that, even in the industrial innovation, in industrial R&D, customers could customers could play a very important role in helping companies design their products. So what Stephen Tumpke and Eric von Hippel wrote in Harvard Business Review in 2002 was that, well, maybe we have some new tools which we can put it on the internet or whatever domain which you want, and those tools could be used by customers to do some of those ideation process. So instead of the firms doing some of that process, some of those processes could be transferred to the customers, and these are industrial customers, by the way. So it could be applied both in consumer products as well as industrial products. So technologies have changed the way in which customers' ideas could be interpreted, transformed, and finally given to the companies or the vendors. In a recent book, C.K. Prahalad and Ramaswamy, University of Michigan, they have a book on customers' experiences. That you might have heard the term experience economy, which is essentially that we are interested more in experiences than in actual products or services. Well, they just point out that maybe the experience of designing a product is part of the package customers are looking for. So the experience of talking with other customers is also part of the product which you want to acquire. Okay, so there are things which we could enhance the value proposition for the end consumer or the customer. So essentially what all this tells you is that we are changing, partly due to the technology, partly due to other reasons, the way in which customers interact with firms and the way in which customers could be playing a role of a partner in value creation. And there's some preliminary evidence of that. Microsoft is a good example of, especially in product support. Procter Gamble has an interesting initiative which is just started, where they call, I think they call it R&D advisor community, essentially using communities or communities of customers to create value for their end products. Volvo, most of these automobile companies have started using internet to allow customers to play around with their concept cars. I'll show you an example of that. GE Plastics is an example of how in the industrial innovation, the customers can be used by providing tools to do some of the tasks which they traditionally the firms used to do. So we have some evidence of what is happening in this. And this is for the, just took a screenshot of GE Plastics. If you're a customer, which means you're a firm who buys plastic resins from GE Plastics, most of the uses of is specialized uses. You want to make something, manufacture something. So GE used to do that task of customizing the resins to meet the requirements of a particular customer. Now what they have done is they put a lot of tools and databases on the domain, which if you're a registered user, you can go and play around with it, and you can actually design the resin which you want GE to manufacture. So some of the work which GE used to do traditionally now has been transferred to their customers. And it's good because it increases the speed of the innovation of the product lifecycle, product development, and also reduces the cost for GE. And so this is one example in the industrial innovation or industrial R&D. Like I said, P&G has something interesting. It's not well developed. They're just starting, I think. they're trying to use their customer communities, and they give something very similar to what you guys give here as MVP, a title. They call it, I think, R&D advisor. And they also have, because they're the kind of products, intellectual property rights are very important for them also. So they have some initiatives on those particular areas. This is a relatively old screenshot of Bang and Olufson, the speakers, audio speakers, and all kinds of electronic. They had a very interesting website where customers could go and talk about the products, and they also had a different part of that where they could actually suggest new additions to that. They have enhanced it. This is a slightly older screenshot. So I'm just trying to show you that there is a variety of products, variety of industries where the same phenomenon can be evidenced. This is, let me see, this is Volvo. This is a website where you can go and there's some concept cars which you can play around with and give feedback. And this is very useful to most of the automobile manufacturers in getting some initial thoughts on some of the future products. So you can pick a car and play around with it. You can change some of the features and give different types of feedback. There are some polls which you can use to provide ratings and stuff like that, which enhances the different ways in which input value can be created. So probably the insight which we can derive from all these examples is that there is a shift in perspective how you view customers. Initially, much of the market research techniques used the perspective of exploiting customer. You go to a customer, talk to the customer, get a lot of information, and trying to derive that knowledge and then create a product based on that. What has changed is that now we are talking about co-creating knowledge and value with customers. And that's very important because it has a lot of implications on the internal structuring of your organization. For example, in Microsoft, how your product development group is structured. Some of the processes, because if you're taking input from the customer into your product development process, you need to make certain accommodations to make sure that there's enough transparency, that you're making good use of the customer inputs. And also there is a lot of implication on customer relationship management. If you take an input from a customer, there is an expectation on the side of the customer. So you want to make sure that you manage that well to ensure that appropriate customer relationships are effective. So we have the potential to change both the nature and the extent, which means that throughout the product life cycle, we can start interacting with customers and getting their inputs, and also the depth or the extent to which you can use those inputs. This is just a way of showing you what are the different roles customers can play in value creation. I just identified 4 basic roles, and in each of those there are different types of inputs a firm can derive. For example, customer's resource is primarily in ideation, providing ideas about new products, new features, product improvement suggestions, etc. of existing products or even new products. Customer's co-creator is more during the product design or product development. You can actually employ or utilize customer input to, let's say, make priorities on design features. You can get input on which feature is more valuable. You can make some trade-offs based on that, design trade-offs. So you can have continuous customer input during the design and development life cycle. And for example, if in the software industry, the open source or the shared source concept allows actually customers to design and develop products, and which can be added to your final product. So it's not just in the ideation process, but also in the actual design and development stage. Customer as buyer primarily is in market diffusion. If you have a customer, word of mouth and all those phenomena or the concepts can be applied as in the communities too. That you can get out the message that a product is coming, and especially if it's an MVP or a lead user, their inputs have much more resonance in the community than coming from the vendor. So you can actually use or you can actually employ or form partnerships with customers in that role itself. Customers users, there are 2 roles. One is in product testing, which is very well known, especially in the software industry. but even more so in the other industries now, or in product support or customer support, where product knowledge base can be utilized to answer queries, to solve problems, different ways in supporting end customers. So you can see that in the product life cycle, all these are different points, and in each of those we have the ability to form partnerships with customers, and that enhances the overall value which is created to the firm. So this is just a summary of what I just discussed. Actually, as a co-producer, it has been more evident in the industrial products, because supplier-customer relationship is a very good example of that, where the suppliers are collaborate with the vendors to create products. Now it's more coming in the consumer products too, in consumer electronics, auto industry, etc. Like I said, as a user in product testing and support, and as a buyer in product diffusion and marketing, and even in product launch. So the underlying theme in all this is that to implement these new roles, we need to have technology, but more importantly, we reach the concept of that knowledge is likely to be created through interactions. Rather than somebody sitting in a room and coming up with a new idea, through interactions, either in the online communities or in other forums, knowledge is created, and that knowledge is, then you need to understand how the interactions occur, what you can do to enhance the quality of the interactions, how you can motivate better interactions. So the focus becomes on interactions and how you can use those interactions to create more value. So that's the idea behind knowledge socialization. Social communities or networks form the primary foundation for creating new knowledge. That's true for even in the broader concept of firms, especially in, let's say, telecommunication industry. You see that rather than a product coming out of one particular firm, product development is happening increasingly among a network of firms. If one firm brings a particular technology or expertise, another firm brings another type of technology or expertise, and so this inter-firm networks becomes the locus of innovation in high technology industry. And that might be true for in the customer co-innovation too. So, like I said, the focus becomes on the interaction, and any ways of strategies or techniques you utilize to enhance the quality of these interactions has an implication on the output, which is the quality of the ideas or the value which is created. So, the idea behind virtual customer environment is to look at the different forums which technology enables us to build and deploy for customers to interact with one another, as well as for customers to interact with the firm. And that could be as simple as a message board or a discussion board, or it could be much more complex. There are some virtual customer methods which you can employ, games and simulations which you can use to participate, multiple customers participating in games through which you learn about their perceptions. Because some of the knowledge which customers have is tacit. And so you want to have different methods by which you can actually tap into those tacit knowledge. And so games are sometimes more effective than direct questions or direct surveys. And so virtual product centers and virtual customer methods assume importance from that perspective. And it also enables us to implement the different roles. And probably the most important part is that whatever we do here has to be integrated with the rest of the organization. There has to be good, strong linkages between what is happening in the customer community or the consumer community and what is happening inside the firm, either in terms of your organization for customer support or the organization which you have set up for product development. And if you don't have that kind of linkage, then there will be value which is created outside, but which you won't be able to bring inside in an effective fashion and in a more importantly, cost-effective manner. So those are some of the examples. So I broadly define virtual customer environments as including any of these forums, centers, knowledge centers, databases, etc., where customers can interact with one another or with the firm. Then there are a lot of issues which, apart from the technical issues, how to design, there are some managerial issues, which is the primary focus of my research. first of all, there are some design elements of virtual customer environments. Those are not just technical design elements, more of a organizational design elements. How do you select customers? How do you reward customers? What kind of titles do you give to customers? What impact does that have? What kind of knowledge creation facilities do you provide? What kind of knowledge do you put it on the public domain? What knowledge do you want not to put on the domain? So those kind of issues. You also need to have a very good understanding of customers' behavior. What are the motivating factors? What actually, what are the factors which actually drive these customers to these communities to create value for somebody else, some other firm? All right. So you want to see what the customers are gaining in return, and is there parity in those benefits which the firm derives and what the customer derives. Like I mentioned earlier, integration with internal units in product development, in customer support, marketing, etc. How you can leverage that. Appropriateness. Maybe it's not appropriate for all the different types of firms. So you need to have a good framework to look at whether such initiatives are ideal for a particular type of firm or a particular industry, and how it could be changed. There are a lot of risks associated with VCEs, and I will come to this at a much slide further. Some of the risk is if you are involving customers, you're actually managing the relationship between customers and vendors. And so you want to make sure that that relationship is not damaged in any way. There are also issues related with intellectual property rights. You want to make sure that there are some clear written rules and systems which are implemented to how you utilize the inputs provided by customers, and as well as how they are rewarded if there is an intellectual property right associated with that. And more importantly, whatever we do in the VCE-based initiative has to become a integral part of the overall product and customer strategy. Otherwise, it will be something which is technically sophisticated, very interesting, but not hitting the bottom line of the firm, or not really attractive for the firm. So you want to make sure that becomes an integral part of the overall business strategy of the firm. So these are different issues which, as I said earlier, much of these are new issues, and this whole concept is probably around maybe 4 to 5 years old, so not much research has been done, and we don't even know in many of these issues what actually the research question is. Okay, so there are a lot of people trying to do research in this area, but it's much preliminary stage. My focus initially has been on behavior, customers, and trying to understand customers' behavior, because first of all, it's relatively easy to access that part of the, there is data which is available and which you can collect and which you can provide, and probably that's more important than any other issue. Understanding the customer's behavior, because then you can implement strategies and tactics which facilitate those kind of behavior, or what is desired behavior. This is just to show that there are some intended and unintended consequences of VCEs. Intended, of course, is that there are some interesting inputs which you get from customers and which you can utilize. Unintended is if you don't manage it well, customers might get dissatisfied. You take an input from a customer, and if there is not enough transparency, you don't do anything with it. Might actually go in the other way. Might get disappointed, frustrated, and it might affect the product loyalty. And it could also have an impact on decisions and actions, product purchase intentions, repeat purchases, etc. So there are a lot of things which could go wrong in this, because you're trying to encroach upon a territory which is traditionally very sacrosanct. It's managed only by one particular department in any firm, customer relationship department. Now, if you're trying to use or employ customers as partners in other parts of the product life cycle, you have to be sensitive to that particular issue. So my question here is, given that the participation is voluntary, they come to the forum or community on a voluntary basis, what motivates them? Or what kind of factors drive the behavior, and what strategies can firms adopt to promote more positive disposition to involve in these kind of communities and value creation? So that's the primary focus. So I'll talk a little bit about what I have done in the last couple of years. Just to give you a very brief background of my study, probably started some early conceptual work in 1999-2000, and I have a paper based on that, which essentially tried to define what is a virtual customer environment and what are the different issues related to that. And then I did a lot of interviews. I wanted to get a much better feel of what customers think. So I tried to interview some of your MVPs and some customers from other companies. And did around 44 interviews and around 36 from Microsoft customers. And this was a very interesting experience talking to these Microsoft MVPs and other customers. You get to know things which are not really intuitive. Okay, and let me put it that way. There are certain things which motivate them which you don't think first initially. And so that was very insightful, and I used that to build up a more empirical study which I conducted in last year, in 2003. I used a survey-based study, tried to collect data from a broader range of customers from both Microsoft and IBM. And we put it on the web and send out emails, used your NetScan to identify some of those customers, and we sent out probably around more than 1,000 such requests, and 152 customers replied, or usable replies. And so some of the study findings which I'm going to show you is based on that. And that was I did that study with Professor Robert Barron, who is a psychologist. My area is not psychology, so I have to, and much of that draws on behavioral research, and so I did it with Professor Robert Barron. Okay, so the key research question is, what factors shape or impact customers' value co-creation behavior, or the behavior in these kind of virtual product forums and communities to create value for the firm? And let me just first show you the model, and then we'll come back as to what are the ideas which we tested in this. Essentially, let me start from the rightmost end of this diagram. Okay, the variable of interest is customers' intent, future intent to participate in value creation, which means that either going to the community and participating in that, or in other forums. So we were interested in what are the factors which drive or which impact their future intent to participate in value co-creation. Okay, and we are also interested in their attitude towards that whole behavior, attitude towards value co-creation. So those are the two, you can call them as the dependent variables of the study, or the variables which we are interested in. And then we went back. Okay, if you look at behavioral research, there are broadly two types of forces in human behavior. One is your belief systems, what we believe in, which impacts your behavior. Okay. The other is a much more shorter term phenomenon, which is affect, which is your feelings and reactions to particular experiences, which affect your future behavior. So one is slightly more longer term, which is your belief systems. The other is shorter term, which is affect. So we tried to model both of that into this particular study. So we were interested in beliefs about the benefits which customers would get from their participation in such activities. And so we went ahead and did a literature review. There are some interesting articles which has come in the, let's say, the open source communities and what motivates them. Not empirical studies, but mostly conceptual work. So we went and reviewed that. We also looked at some of the innovation literature. We basically identified a lot of motivators, and we tried to classify them into appropriate buckets, so that is much more easy to test. So we came up with around 6 different types of beliefs, or 6 types of benefits which are important in the customer's mind. And all these beliefs are about benefits which they derive from participating in value co-creation. So starting with the first one is learning, which is very intuitive, that you go to a community, you participate in that, you learn more about the product, you learn more about the technology, you learn more about how the product is going to evolve in future, what are the different ways in which you can use the product. So there are a lot of things which you can learn about the product, which is probably a very good motivator. So beliefs about how much you can learn about the product from the community or from the virtual forum. It also has an economic perspective. If you look at the open source community, and even in the Microsoft communities, many people who have participated in these kind of communities have actually, because they have learned and they have gained some expertise in a particular category or technology, that has turned into job opportunities. That has turned to several people have written books. In fact, one of the MVPs I interviewed had written one of those dummy, what is it called? Particular product written for dummies, and those sort of books. So, publishing opportunities, job opportunities, based on the expertise and the learning which they derive. So, indirect economic appropriation of value for the customer, not direct. Okay, but it's very interesting. Second is relational, that you come up and interact with a lot of strangers, and you set up relationships, interpersonal relationships, which could have, again, a value on your job, because you are interacting with people in a particular professional domain, which could turn into, so you can build up a network, and it could also have other social implications, sense of belongingness, and all the other aspects related to that. Third is reputational. Titles like MVP or anything, which even if you don't get a title, if you participate in these kind of forums and fellow customers perceive you as an expert, that is good enough, or that is a reputational gain, which you could utilize in outside the forum in some cases, or it could by itself be a sufficient motivator. So that is reputational gains. Influence, that's a very interesting thing. Even in the management literature, there's a lot of studies has been conducted, and customers have two types of influence. One is influencing the vendor, for example, influencing Microsoft as to how it develops its products. And that has a theoretical base which is called agency theory. Agency theory essentially is that if you're a customer, you want to monitor the product development so that you gain whatever you want to have in terms of features, in terms of the particular nuances of those features, etc. So there is a influence which you would like to have on your product development vendor, which could be of benefit to you in the future. You could also have an influence on peer customer, how other customers use their product. Now that's a sense of what is called as self-efficacy. We want to impact or influence the external world. So, for example, I want to come here and give you, brief you on my study and hope to influence your thoughts on this particular topic. And I derive some benefit out of that, or derive some, intellectual gains from that. So, same thing. If you go to a product community and answer a query or whatever, do or participate in that and impact how your peer customer uses that product, that's an influence which would be a sufficient motivator. So there are two types of influence. Creativity, some people like to solve puzzles. In fact, one of the things which I asked in my interviews was, do you like to solve technical puzzles? And invariably, all the MVPs said that they do. Not computer science, but other types of puzzles. And so, or it could be that you're creative, and this is a forum for you to come and exhibit your creativity. So that itself is a benefit. And the last one is hedonic, which is could range anything from pure entertainment value. You go to a forum, spend some time, and that itself is it's a very enjoyable and fun time to interact with other customers, and you gain some benefits out of that. Or it could be that if you have provided a very well-designed virtual forum, the navigational challenges and the challenge of interacting with that interface is of hedonic value, which is the concept of flow in psychology, that you create a website or a virtual product forum if it provides mental stimulation to the user, that's a benefit. So it could be of different types, but it could also be very simple, that you like to hang out with a bunch of users or customers you are familiar with once every week or every other day. So these are some of the beliefs about the benefits, and we tried to put in neat buckets so that we could do some empirical work. And what you see down there is effect. And let me also, before I go there, let me also show you some quotes, just to give you an idea about some of these benefits. These are from my interviews. The first one is the one I said that indirect economic appropriation. You get new job opportunities, get to hear about job opportunities. Somebody recommends your name after having seen you on the product community, etc., etc. Second is learning. And third is, to some extent, creativity. So you can see evidence of different types of benefits which different people have different needs. Some perceive learning to be the more efficient or more effective benefit. The others might perceive creativity. This is another set of quotes. Again, the first one is Microsoft customer saying that he or she has enjoyed solving technical puzzles, and probably that's a very good forum. It provides opportunities to do that. And the second quote is about collective influence. If you are a single customer trying to influence Microsoft or any other large vendor, it's not that easy. Your need doesn't have that much value. But you walk into a community of customers, and now you change the game, because now you're talking about, I don't know, hundreds or maybe thousands, a more set of people who are providing opinions of a particular product. It becomes collective influence, and has been found to be very effective in influencing vendors' behavior. And this is one example, but it could also be other examples. And customers perceive the collective influence. They say that they can perceive that because, for example, one of the Microsoft customers told me that when a particular query doesn't get answered, or if it remains for at least 20 to 25 on the website, you invariably hear from the firm. So there is a threshold level where they perceive that now gains sufficient importance for the vendor to step in and answer the query or address it. And so collective influence is very important in these kind of communities. Affect, like I said, it's a mild shift in your reactions and feelings. You go to a community, have an interaction, you become frustrated with it, or you enjoyed it, or you're very disappointed, or you get some flaming and you become very angry with it. So after each interaction experience, you have a slight or mild shift in your mood or reactions and feelings. And that's what, this is a quote from a Microsoft customer. This is a very representative quote. Many customers have these kind of things. So as you can see that it has a lot more than just effect, but that's important. And many times it's hidden. It's not easily perceivable either to the customer or to the vendor. Even if you go to the community and you feel a change in your mood after the community, you may not know about it, but it might affect your future participation, but you may not actually perceive it that easily because you don't know where to attribute that mood shift. You don't know whether it is interactions with your spouse or interactions with the community that provoked it. So sometimes it's very hidden, and that's what makes it much more interesting. This is one more. So it could be either positive or negative. So essentially we're saying that positive effect could increase participation, at least in the shorter term. Negative could actually impact it in the negative direction. Okay, let me just go back to my diagram. And so we said beliefs and affect, and then we looked at what actually shapes some of these beliefs, and how do the interaction characteristics change that. So we looked at some of the factors. One is how much is the product-related content in the interaction. The more the product-related content, does that enhance the learning, beliefs related to learning? Likewise, non-product-related content, talking about politics, talking about other things, does it impact the relational, reinforce relationships? Interactivity and identification. Identification is whether customers who come to the community are identify themselves, or are they anonymous, or does it make a difference on their future behavior? Knowing whom you're interacting with, or you don't know who the other end is. Interactivity is the speed or the synchronous, whether it is asynchronous, synchronous communication, the type of communication that you have in the community. The more interactive your community is, the more likely that you're going to get some hedonic benefits, etc. So we made some predictions based on that. So that's essentially the model which we tested. Let me just very quickly go to the findings. Well, we found that that's the first part. The nature or the characteristics of the interactions actually impact or shape the beliefs. So there are some relationships between what is the type of interaction that occurs in the community and what are how do they reinforce the beliefs in about the benefits. For example, we said that found that product-related content impacts all types of all the 6 beliefs. The more product-related content is an interaction, the more it enhances all those 6 beliefs. Interestingly, we found that non-product-related content doesn't have any impact on any of those beliefs. Identification enhances reputational beliefs. That's very intuitive. For example, if you know who the other customers are, you assign more value to the reputation which in that particular community compared to if it were anonymous. And then we found that interactivity enhances the beliefs related to influence, creativity, and hedonic. So the bottom line here is that the type of interaction which occurs shapes the belief systems. Okay, so there is something which you can actually, design the environment so as to affect or impact the beliefs the customers hold. Then we found that, this is very interesting, we found that all those 6 different types of beliefs which we tested, only actually 2 of them make any difference on their attitudes or the future behavior. Those are learning and influence. The more a customer perceives the learning related benefits, the more likely they are like to participate in the community or the virtual forum. Similarly, the more they perceive they can influence either the vendor or the peer customers, the more likely they are to participate in the community. The other types of benefits, while positive, they were not statistically significant, which means that they probably doesn't play a significant role in shaping the future behavior. And we'll come back to that point a little later on, because it raises some very interesting discussion issues about the MVP program and stuff like the reputational programs. We found that affective reactions are very important. They shape to, at least in the short term, they affect the attitudes towards value co-creation. Attitude is a very important predictor of the future intent. And we also looked at 2 other factors. One is how involved the customer is with the product extent of product involvement. The more the involved the customer is, the more likely they are to participate. And we also looked at the community norms. What is the norms and values of the community regarding participation in value creation? If you go to a community where it's considered to be very, ideal, or the norms are very favorable to that, then it enhances the participation level. So most of those are intuitive. We also found some direct relationship. We found that interactivity and identification impacts the intent directly, which means that the design of your virtual environment has an impact on their behavior, not through attitudes or effect, but directly on their behavior, which means that there are some characteristics of the design of the environment that you need to be very careful about. So all this tells you that what we need to focus on is on the interactions, because interactions can directly impact behavior as well as indirectly through the beliefs and the change in affective states. And so that brings us to the topic of interaction experience, and that's where we should, what is the experience of the customer when they come to one of those virtual product forums or communities? And that experience has different components. And so we need to look at all those different components and make sure that that's a positive experience. It definitely varies with the role of the customer, whether you're participating in product support or in let's say, in the ideation phase. More importantly, these experiences are likely to complement the experiences outside the virtual environment. So if somebody comes to the virtual forum, interacts with customers, have a very positive experience, goes offline, the experience with the product offline is going to affect, so there is going to be interactions between these two types of experiences. And like I said earlier, they are also likely to impact product-related loyalty of the customer, trust of the vendor, etc. So a lot of factors which the interactions could play a very important role. So an interesting issue would be, can we design virtual environments so as to create positive experiences? Portfolios of positive experiences, which means that based on the role customer plays in the product lifecycle, you need to have different portfolios of positive experiences. And if you can, then it's likely to lead to more active participation and of benefit to both the vendor as well as the customer. Let me just take a very provoking question here. Are reputational programs like the MVP programs or other important? And at least just based on this study, of course, it cannot be generalized too much, but what it tells you is that maybe it doesn't have a direct impact in terms of just because I am an MVP, it is not going to motivate me enough to go and participate. But what makes a difference is that when I become an MVP, the contexts are created for deriving positive experiences. It could be that I interact with other MVPs. It could be that I come to your MVP summit. It could be that I interact with somebody inside Microsoft. So there are different contexts which could be created, which lead to positive experience. The very fact that I get a title is probably not, at least when you ask them, that doesn't come through. Okay, at least let me put it that way. And so that's a quote which from one of the MVPs, and have a few other quotes just to show you that what is more important is how you create the context for deriving different experiences. And so this whole reputation program can be perceived from that perspective. Rather than just giving them something, creating context for them to derive positive experiences. That might be more cost-effective too, if you think about it. Okay, and those experiences could be actually interfaced with the other product-related experiences, in which case it becomes much more powerful. The other issue is how this whole thing can be integrated with internal product development teams. And it doesn't come automatically, and all the firms have realized that if you take input from customers, the first thing which they come across is a cultural issue within the product development teams. Traditionally, there is a not invented here syndrome in most companies, especially in industrial innovation. That's very high. So you need to create processes, you need to create new roles which will facilitate taking inputs from customers or whatever value is created externally by the customers and taking it inside the firm, whether it is to product marketing folks or to your product development folks or your product support folks. And maybe some of those roles would be important. In some cases, you need to increase the transparency of the process. You need to show the customer what is being done with their inputs in the different phases. Okay, and that's a very tricky question because you don't want to make it too transparent. At the same time, you want to show the customer that something is being done with their inputs in a very productive fashion. That increases the sense of influence, and that increases the participation. So, for example, I just took this couple of quotes about the relationship with people inside Microsoft. You'll see that one person thinks that it's very integral to the way in which they add value to the firm. Some people feel it that they bring them closer to the product, each interaction with somebody inside Microsoft. So they could have different ways of or different impact. I'll just rush through so that you get some time to ask me some questions. these are some of the ways in which it could impact. It could speed up the time to market or develop the product because you get more active inputs from customers. It could reduce the cost in different phases of the product life cycle. Could enhance the product market fit because you are much more closer to the customer. Increase the customer loyalty because they have a stake in the value which they have created. Accelerate product adoption diffusion. So all these are different ways in which that could impact the firm's strategies and tactics. You also need to think about the appropriateness. Is it relevant for your firm, or which type of customer role is more relevant? That might be a more interesting issue. Maybe in some firms, bringing customers to create value, the product support is very valuable, but not probably in the product development cycle or product development part. So you need to think about the product, how knowledge intensive that product is, what kind of innovation your product development is. It an incremental or is it something radical? If it's radical, you probably are not going to get those ideas from customers. If it's incremental innovation, then probably customers are a very good source of ideas and suggestions. Nature of the product market, how mature the technology is, how mature the product is. The more mature the product is, the more likely customers will be able to add value. And type of customers, so there are a lot of factors which you can look at and see whether how relevant it is for your firm to think about the initiative. Like I said, there is also risk. The first risk is obviously if you try to give too much value to the customer inputs, you might be designing some products which are not based on the larger customer requirements. A very small active community of customers might make a lot of noise and get your attention. You probably want to head your the design such a way that it doesn't get too much aligned to a small set of customers. Risk associated with customer relationship, which is very important, like I said earlier, with markets and competition. You don't want to divulge what you're doing. So there are some issues related to how much you can involve your product in some types of product development initiatives. And risk associated with IP rights. How do you share the economic rents generated from customer suggestions? You don't want to get sued by customers, right? So there are issues related to that. So that's pretty much my presentation, and I'm trying to do some work based on that. First of all, I'm interested in how do you devise those kind of positive experiences, and how do you link it to the different roles. Another interesting issue would be how do you find out the impact on customers' product-related purchase and usage decisions. Do people who come to the product forums regularly or more frequently have much more loyalty to the product? Does it have any impact on their future product purchase decisions, etc.? And some of the metrics for VC, these kind of initiatives. So, just to conclude, we could at least say that this whole idea of virtual customer environments has a lot of potential to include customers or to embrace customers as partners in value creation. Okay, let's put it, there are some weaknesses, but at least there is a lot of promise and potential. We also need to focus on the interaction experiences, which is the one focal point which is going to shape the behavior, the participation, etc. We need to adopt a more holistic perspective to make sure that this is integrated with whatever the rest of the organization is doing, and so that you can appropriate the most value. And I will stop there. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be more than...
Your point about the MVP program's potential for incentivizing behavior. I wonder, maybe if I could say it back to you, if you'll tell me if this is a proper characterization. It isn't the name MVP that's the motivator, but it's the experience of being an MVP that's a motivator.
Exactly.
Yeah. That would be it.
Yeah.
So the value of being able to say MVP after your email address in the news group, at least when they self-report, is not what they would identify as the big benefit.
Yeah.
But and therefore that we'll bracket that. They won't say that. But that they will say that being an MVP means they have access to people, relationships, the firm itself, and it's that set of relationships that motivates them to remain, well, if not remain an MVP, but to remain engaged in the behaviors that MVP-like behaviors exhibit.
Yep.
So that would be...
I think that would be pretty correct. At least that, to the extent what I found is that even in interviews it comes out. If you ask them, I'm pretty sure they're not going to say that just because I became an MVP and became more active. They don't want to say that, or less active, whatever it is. But most of them told me that one thing which changed was not the title, but they were exposed to more things, or their experience in this community became much more enriching. In whatever way, I don't know what are the different ways in which it became more enriching, but at least it became much more enriching. And
so would you say that if that set of enrichment opportunities was just widely accessible to everybody, would it still have the same value to them? In other words, is the exclusivity at all a feature of it?
I don't think so. One of the things which we put is actually the subjects of the study is not just MVPs. It's 152 customers. It's around let's say around 30 to 40% are MVPs. The others are not customers. Others are just customers in the community because I send it out randomly. So we put as a control variable whether you got a title as an MVP or not, or any other title from the vendor, and that didn't come out significant, which at least tells me that the title as such has not much impact, but what it tells me is that the overall experience, for example, influencing the company or influencing peer customers, might make a big difference. So if I am an MVP, and if my inputs are taken much more seriously than other customers' inputs, either by other customers or by the vendor, then it has an impact on my participation.
I have a question about the VCEs. So, did you get any feedback from these customers that participate in those VCEs regarding the presence of people of the company in there versus there are, there's those hybrid members of those VCEs that are either customers or they are actually part of the company, right? And I mean, what do they say about? I mean, does that move positively to some, negatively to others?
Well, in the study, I didn't have anything of that particular, but in the interviews, let me just think. And definitely, what came out is, I don't know whether it is through the participation in the community or maybe coming here physically. Each interaction which they had with somebody of the product development group or somebody associated within Microsoft who is aligned with their particular interest, they viewed that as very important, as an opportunity for them to influence, as an opportunity for them to provide inputs which they think is very important. It might be just a perception game. It might be just that they perceive that is, but that is good enough to shape their behavior, whether actually it happens or not.
You were saying that individual customers feel they cannot affect the company in any way. I do recall one version of Excel for the Macs. They said that 50% of customer suggestions were accepted in the final product, which shocked me as a very high number, but it may be an outlier.
Yeah. Well, personally speaking, the larger the firm, as a user, as a product user, whether it is buying a car or whether buying a software product, I don't think that I have much influence on a company's strategies or the way a product evolves or anything of that sort. But the moment I become a member of a community, I think at least I perceive that there is a much bigger force operating here from the customer side. And traditionally that has been the focus of all these customer protection groups. But now things have changed, is that this is not an organized activity. This is just a set of people coming here. And so it becomes much more powerful on the vendor compared to an organized group. In fact, I think in your book, in the edited book which you had, Gurak had an article on how collective influence played a role in Apple's, one of the problems which Apple faced. And so there are some examples of, in other firms, how collective influence could shape vendors' behavior.
Regarding the balance let's just say that I'm a supporter of open source and I am in the MVP community, right? Or basically identifying myself would hurt me, right? But how do you balance the recognition with the anonymity?
Let me try to understand. You're saying it would hurt you in what respect?
It could potentially hurt an individual to identify themselves as let's say somebody who works at Microsoft, right? In an open source community.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So how are things like that balanced? I mean, how do you recognize these?
Well, I think one thing which is different is that open source communities are different because there is no central profit-making entity involved. And so to that extent, you as a participant in the process of value creation, all of us are deriving value from it equally, right? Because it's a shared resource, shared product. But vendor-based, which is my focus of my study, vendor-based virtual environments, there is one particular profit-making entity which is sitting there, which is trying to create, appropriate much of the value. So the relationships and the things, I believe, might be slightly different. But going back, I think the identification is important. If you have sufficient trust in the community, if it's a community of virtual forum where there's a lot of people coming and going and there's not much cohesiveness, then probably what you're saying is true. In fact, you wouldn't want to identify yourself. But if it becomes a cohesive group after some time, you probably want to identify yourself because permanence has a very important factor. How long your tenure is in the community is a very important factor. If you're a senior, so the earlier you identify, at least identify with a permanence. You don't need to provide your name, but at least identify with a permanence. That might play a role.
I think you can increase participation in VCEs by perhaps giving the MVPs access to a portal where then they can participate in product suggestions and the product development part of.
I would think so. I was just reading a news item that I think MVP shared source initiative or something like that, which allows MVPs to at least in some way of in actually participating in some type of product development. I think that would make a big difference, even if it's a add-on type of product or module, not the core product as such. But I think it would be a big difference. Yeah.
Would you agree with this broad assessment that the driving engine for MVPs is recognition? The more they're recognized in their community, the more incentive they have to participate. And that goes back to Mark's point when he say, whatever he said is, I'm not going to repeat it. And is that okay? It's not the title; it's the more know how much the people in their community know and how much value they can associate to the identity of the community. Would you say that that's also a fair characterization?
That would be fair. I think that's true, but in the sense that the way I would look at it is, if I'm a participant, at least from my study, what it tells me is that positive experiences, bottom line, positive experiences is going to enhance my participation. Now, what is the source of that positive experience could be different. MVP program could be a very good source of positive experience. Even if I'm not an MVP, okay, if the community designs such that I get a lot of positive experiences, then that's good enough. Or it could also shape behavior in the same positive manner. Now, whether we don't know whether how strong each of those would be. We might find that in reputational program based gives much more stronger positive experiences compared to something else. But I think that's the way I think I would look at it.
So positive experience might make you a repeated customer, but I don't know if it makes you positive active customers, like MVPs. They come, they contribute day in, day out, they give answers. Do you think it's only based on positive experience or the incentive of being recognized as different, as a senior member, as, extra?
Right. Well, to the extent my study tells me, that's why I said I can't generalize too much, because the population is, first of all, it's not really that generalized to generalize across companies or anything. To the extent of my study findings, I would say that it has less than influence or the perception of influence. But what you say could be all true. What you would need to do is, I think, study a much larger population, and more importantly, of people, MVPs and non-MVPs, in a much larger manner. Then we could do some relative studies like that. Yeah.
I have two questions. One, what is the profile of these MVPs? Are these largely like on male? You interviewed?
I have some data. Yeah, they're largely male. If I recollect, it's around 78% male, and maybe around somewhere around that figure.
So were there any differences when you interviewed?
Interviews. I don't offhand. I can't remember, but I did talk to a lot of female MVPs, but I don't recollect. But I think majority were essentially male. I don't know the population, whether that's reflective of the population or is it biased. I did talk to people in different countries, though. In fact, many of the female MVPs from Europe. So I don't know whether that is, again, biased sample or is it represent. I don't have any idea of the overall population, but that was, yeah.
The other question I had was if the industry changes, for example, if it's a games industry and there are fan communities, so, there's a Star Trek game and I love one of the crew members. So I'm there so then the results of your
learning and
that change because people, fan communities, then we are there for a different reason.
Right. Well, it could be different. First of all, I think one underlying thing could be that, like I said earlier, if it's a fan community which is not directly tied to the vendor, let's say Sony games which are not directly tied to which is not part of the Sony forums, outside the Sony forums. I don't know how, because that would be different because there is no one particular organization trying to, manage that process, or there's no vendor behind it. This study, at least to the extent that the findings could be generalized, is for communities or groups or virtual forums which are managed by a particular vendor.
For example, the Microsoft Xbox, all the titles come from that. But a different group from the same.
Right. Well, it could be. Again, it could be different because now we are getting into the type of the product and how the product characteristics. The only thing which we looked at from that perspective was product involvement, which we found was very positive. How involved you are with the product, which looks at how directly you use the product, how frequently you use the product, etc. Now we could have a much more fine-grained characteristics of that. For example, if it's depending on the type of product, if it's a fan community or if it's a very simple application software, then it could be different. So we could incorporate more such factors which relate to what you're saying in terms of product characteristics. Then we might be able to, find more interesting things.
So the thing is that the kind of people who would participate in such forums are people who are most probably fairly comfortable with the product, right? They're probably at least towards the expert user level. But when you take their input towards designing a product, and your product is supposed to target a wide range of users from, my mom, who's a very novice user, to the real expert. So how do you make sure that the information you get from these people doesn't skew your product development process?
That's a very interesting question. In fact, that's why I said one of the risks is that if you listen too strongly to a particular category of customers, like lead users or expert users, you have a risk of developing a product which is based on their requirements alone and which may not cater to the needs of the larger majority of customers. So that's a very important risk which you need to manage, the way in which you identify the customers. And that goes back to the point of how you take the value which is created externally by customers inside the firm. And that has an implication how much value you attribute to each of those inputs. Which type of customers get more value than the other type of customers. So there are a lot of issues related to that. How you use the inputs provided by customers. And that has been an issue in market research too. If you use focus groups and traditional market research, if you're not very careful about how you, draw those customers from, then you have a representational issue. So that would be a very important risk which vendor would need to manage.
Those MVPs or those dedicated participants in the newsgroup are exposed most directly to the novice user's issues, which they address, and probably reflect that experience more than developers back in Redmond who are almost never exposed to those novice questions. And novices are likely to both, novices are likely in some cases to go and ask those questions, but the MVPs are likely to be the ones to answer them. So they're probably going to experience that newbie frequently asked question experience, so they'll trip over handling many of your, you only have the one mom, but many of our moms' questions out there. So perhaps that's one avenue that gives them a better ear to that novice population, even if they are the expert population.
I think he raised an important issue because we are presuming that is true. Many firms have found that from practice that probably that's not true. I don't know about the Microsoft MVP case, but broadly in the market research, that's a big thing about how Nielsen goes and talks to a set of customers and conducts a study, and how representational that is. Even if you look at the TV ratings, you might wonder whom they are asking, right? Which is so that's a problem in many market research tools and
both newbies and experts. Right? Yeah. Although as we open up the on-ramps, we're bringing in more and more of the real, just run-of-the-mill newbie user. The naive user is being brought in larger and larger numbers, and so the voice of that naive user, I think, is getting louder and louder. So I take your point, though. I mean, clearly, your sample matters. All right. Well, yeah.
You mentioned the MVP Summit that was held earlier this year. I attended one day of that, and it's a few days where they do give some information to them, but I attended the sort of rally the troops day. Kind of reminded me of our company meeting, with Ballmer and some of the executives talking to us. And it's obviously a very expensive event. And my instincts tell me that it was probably worth it, but does your study, comment one way or the other that a big event like that is a good thing, that it changes the outcome of the behavior of the MVPs the following year?
In the study, an empirical study, I didn't incorporate any such thing, so I can't comment on that at least from the empirical. From interviews, I talked to a few people. I interviewed most of these people in 2001, 2002, and some of the people had gone to the MVP Summit in 2001, some of them hadn't. So it's a mixed set of people. But I think many people said that they had a good experience. Now, I don't know whether that has that much impact on their future participation behavior, but at least that was perceived as something which sort of exclusive club, and that they were able to and Microsoft provided access to their internal, they were able to see the people behind the product. That's very important. And talk to that. That's true even in other communities. If you look at the best community studies come across is about the Jeep. They have these summits in different places, and the product development brand managers go to these summits and talk to the customers, and they're all almost like there's a I wouldn't put a word, but it's not really clan, but it's close to that, who are very believers in the product, and one thing which has come across is that their interactions with internal people, brand managers, product managers, makes a big difference in how they perceive their ties with the product and presumably their participation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.